in here. Well, hey, Dave Melend here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. Super excited to be hanging out with Dr. Mark Devine. And we have a great question for the listener today. And the question is it possible to become unbeatable? And I thought about that and I thought, man, you think about these sports guys like, Jordan, and you think about all these guys that and they lose way more than they win in games and shots and all that stuff. And I'm like, where does the guy come off saying, is it possible to become unbeatable? So I'm like, I got to get this guy on my show. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Dr. Mark Devine. How are you today, my friend?
I'm fantastic, Dave. Thanks very much. You don't have to win every game to be unbeatable.
Oh my gosh, you're
How
already
you,
laying it
how
out
you
for us
lose.
right away.
Right.
Love
You
it.
can be,
Fill us in. Fill us in on that.
well, it's how you play the game, right? So it doesn't matter whether you win, it matters whether you grow. So an unbeatable mind is one that's relentlessly committed to growth, to tap the fullest potential that's possible, right? Any individual in this lifetime. And that
Awesome.
potential is largely completely hidden from view and has been obscured in our culture, especially our Western culture. So it's my mission to really help people understand that they do have that vast potential and how to train to unlock it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So I'm already from a limited mindset right there because I had a totally different viewpoint of unbeatable. I'm like, Mark, how in the world can we never be beat? And so thank you for clarifying that. So you are founder and CEO of Unbeatable Mind. You are an expert in global leadership and change. You are also a retired U.S. Navy SEAL commander. So thank you for your service to this awesome country. And you have a podcast called The Mark Devine Show. So with all that going on, holy cow, how did you get to this spot? Kind of walk us through your journey because I love seeing your on your website some pictures when you were younger and different things that have gone on. So fill in the listener if you can, Mark, on how you got
Sure.
here today.
It's an interesting winding story. Um, some of it planned, and most of it just kind of showed up, right? Which happens when you're aligned and fulfilling what I call your purpose, right? Your three P's, your purpose, passion, and principles. I didn't grow up having any clue that I was going to ever be a SEAL or even be a teacher and an author. I was groomed to be a corporate guy, and so
Okay.
I actually my first career was in Manhattan. I got my MBA at Stern School. I became a CPA working with Coopers and Lyman, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. But the seminal kind of pivotal moment for me was because I was really athletic and I was looking for kind of a comprehensive, integrative training regimen. And I already had the sense that I was going to be a lifetime athlete, right? Which is definitely a little bit unusual. I think more and more people are starting to see that as a potential, right? But back in the 80s, I was pretty much a rare bird saying, like this body, I'm going to keep it strong and healthy for as long as I need it, right? And so
Sure.
I found a martial arts program. I didn't have any experience with it except to see the transformative power of a martial art for my freshman roommate, who literally transformed him from this immature jerk to this really, mature and respectful human being in 4 short years.
Sure.
Anyway, so um, the reason I'm telling this story here is it was, when the students are ready, the teachers appears, right? So my teacher appeared to me in the form of this Japanese grandmaster who founded this style of karate called Seido, which means the way of sincerity. And the unique thing about him, besides that he was completely different than any human being I'd ever seen and experienced, became my
Sure.
father figure. He was a Zen master. And so at the ripe age of 21, Dave, I started training my mind through the disciplined practice of Zen. And it utterly transformed everything. It
Okay.
transformed how I see myself, my relationship with the world. It transformed my very brain. And through that process, I began to get insight that I was misaligned. I was barreling down the wrong path fast. And that would have led to that life of quiet desperation that Thoreau talked about, or some sort of breakdown in 10 or 20 years, like we see a lot in our culture.
Sure.
And so I better get serious. I better ask better questions. And I learned through my meditation that I was meant to be a warrior. So then I started asking, how am I meant to be a warrior? And that's when the SEALs kind of revealed themselves to me through another synchronous event. And 4 years into my New York experience, I got my MBA, CPA, and my black belt all in November 1989. And I walked away from it all to go to Officer Candidate School because I had gotten selected, one of two people that year to get selected from the civilian world to go to Navy SEAL training as an officer. And that was 1990. So I complete 180 degree from corporate, striking out to be a corporate chiefdom and make a ton of money to I'm a warrior in the most elite unit in the world, right? Special
Sure.
operations. And not only that, but I was number one in my training class out of 185 hardcore, really fit guys. I was number one graduate out of 19 who graduated.
Wow.
And I attribute that success to the mental development that I had received through the Zen and the combination of Zen, martial arts, breathing, meditation, mindfulness, all at the early age of 21 to 25. It was so profound, the shift, that I started to teach the skills to my teammates. And then later on, when I got off active duty, I stayed in the reserve. So I have 20 years in the Navy SEAL, 10 years active, in the field, doing missions, 10 years reserve as a commander, where I was still doing missions, but I had a life outside the SEALs when I was not in
Sure.
uniform. And so I started a business called SEAL Fit to begin to train these skills to Navy SEAL candidates and other military operators. And we started to see some extraordinary success. And I called the program Unbeatable Mind. And that's really, that program was so successful that I had people writing books about it. And then I had a publisher come to me and say, hey, would you write a book about this program that you're offering? Because it's so unique and it's having such a positive effect. So
Sure.
that led to what are now 6 books.
Wow.
So I became an accidental author. And then, of
Sure.
course, my stepdaughter was my marketing person. And she's like, hey, you should start a podcast. This is back 10 years ago. I've got 10 years
Yeah.
into the podcast. And I'm
Nice.
like, what's a podcast? She's like,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
you're already doing it because you have guests come in and you record their conversations, and you offer it to your followers. So all we got to do is like tighten it up a little bit and put it up on
Sure.
Apple and boom,
Yeah.
podcast.
Wow.
So that's how I got here. It was really interesting because I didn't start out my life thinking I'm going to be a Navy SEAL or that I was going to write books or that I was going to be, a teacher. It really happened because I kind of found my sweet spot and I was super passionate about being a warrior. And then that
Yeah.
became a warrior scholar and then a warrior teacher. But the warrior part has always been there. Hence, it's hard
Yeah.
to take the SEAL out of a Navy SEAL.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow. That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. There was something that you said, Mark, that I kind of want to unpack because you talked about asking better questions. And, for the entrepreneur that's listening right now, that's like, what does that mean? Because I'm so busy making payroll, paying the rent, selling something, finding a new customer, whatever it is that we do. I don't have time to stop because I heard you, talk about this, asking better questions. How did that come up for you? And what kind of questions were you asking yourself?
Well, now that we have AI LLMs, I can actually relate it to that because the quality of the output is going to be, dependent upon the quality of your question to the LLM.
Hmm.
So your mind works the same way. The quality of the output and the quality of your life is going to be directly related to the quality of the questions that you ask, both to
Okay.
yourself and others. So when I was sitting on that meditation bench, and I'm 21, 22, and 23, it took a while. Like I learned then that there's a real progression. Like things happen and open up, and your brain transform neuroplastically in kind of a sequence, right? And so first, I was developing very disciplined attention control, the ability to control my attention and to hold my attention on my breath and on the object of what our the Zen practice was. But
Okay.
then it opened up to what mindfulness tries to achieve, but beyond mindfulness, which I call witnessing, which is the ability to kind of observe what's happening non-judgmentally without engaging with it. And so that opens up to this idea of this experience of witnessing, where you become the noticer of the observation of what's happening without engagement or even judgment or without grasping. And your seed of identity, once that happens, and it happens more repeatedly and for longer periods of time during extended periods of practice or duration of practice, your identity shifts from the thinker, I am the thinker, for instance, I am angry, to the witnesser, to where you say, this is interesting, anger is happening, but that's not who I am.
Okay.
And when you begin to see that experience or begin to have that experience, then all you have are the capacity to ask questions, because everything that happens to you and through you or by you, you have this big space in between, and you have the capacity and actually the willingness to say, is this necessary? Is this valuable? Is this important? Should I engage with this thought? And what I learned was like 90% of the stuff that was happening to me, through me, my brain, my thinking, the stories I was telling myself early in this practice was just crap.
Okay.
It was not my story. It wasn't really my thinking, and they weren't really my beliefs. It was all fed to me. It was all trained into me. And I have a saying that I teach my folks, if you're not training your mind, someone's training it for you, and the results will speak for itself.
Sure.
So I started to ask better questions. I said, how did I come to have this belief that I was supposed to be, a multimillionaire corporate chieftain or Wall Street trader? Well, that came from my parents, and it
Okay.
also came from my peers at Colgate University. But it wasn't me. I never asked myself the question, is that who Mark is? Right? And so there's a series of those questions. Do I really enjoy putting on a suit every day and going and working literally at the equivalent of a cubicle? And the answer was absolutely not. Not only
Sure.
do I not, I can't stand it. So why am I doing it? Right? That's the better question. Why are you doing this? Um, and so then when I started to like question my original story, my origin story, that opened up the space to allow new ideas about who I am and who I could be and how I could show up in the world. And so I started asking questions about that, and I started to get the sense that I was a warrior. So then the question became, okay, if I'm meant to be a warrior, then how, right? Am I supposed to be a warrior in the business world, or what? And that's when what synchronicity is, the universe's response to asking good questions. It doesn't always come in a voice in your head or suddenly knowing. It's being shown a lot of the time.
Wow, that's
So
great. And that was going to be one of my questions is like, what are you looking for? Because open-ended why questions, you could sit for long periods of time and not get an answer, an
sure,
audible, an inner, an inner movement. So you were talking about outward things happening. So was
right.
that pretty prevalent for you?
Definitely. And the reason this works well or works at all it has to be in conjunction with a meditative process, because meditation, one of the primary benefits of meditation, Dave, is that it changes your brain so that you can work from both contextual awareness as well as content awareness. Meaning you distinctly develop, like I mentioned earlier, your focused attention. Your ability to really focus, get things done has great benefits for deep work. I wrote 2 books in one year, and that was all focused attention. But it also opens up your situational awareness, your contextual awareness. And so focused attention is a left hemispheric function. Relax, contextual awareness is a right hemispheric function. And so when both of these strengthen, but they also, the crossover between the two hemispheres becomes much more fluid. And so they go online at the same time instead of having to switch back and forth. And most Westerners spend probably 90% of their time in the focused attention hemisphere, right? Left brain thinking. Um, and very little time in the right hemisphere, which is contextual awareness. And the unique thing about the right hemisphere is it's not the seat of time and space. It's the left hemisphere that creates the structures of the left hemisphere that create the human experience of separation of events in time and separation of bodies in space. Right hemisphere contextual awareness doesn't have that distinction. And so you tend to have way more awareness and perceptual range of the non-physical, of spontaneous things happening, of what we call synchronicity. And so when you ask the question, especially when you're in that state, you're going to attain from deep meditation.
Okay.
The universe hears that question and it's gonna answer it in a way that's appropriate for you. And a lot of times it's by showing you something in the physical world, or having a person show up right at the right time, or phone call, right?
Sure.
These synchronous events. That's what happened to me. Like when I asked how am I supposed to be a warrior, within 2 weeks, I found myself walking home from my office one night, and I walked past a Navy recruiting office, and I just stopped in my tracks, like stunned, because there was a poster facing out in the street, and it said "Be someone special" on the top, and it had images of Navy SEALs doing what I thought was wickedly cool stuff. It said nothing about the Navy SEALs, but I stopped, looked at that poster, and said, "That's how I'm supposed to be a warrior." That's it right there.
So that's a great way to look at it, Mark. I'm just curious, how do you like determine that versus you walk past a McDonald's and they were hiring for, I don't know, whatever, but a McDonald's franchise was for sale.
Sure.
How do you kind of, because we're
Well, that's
inundated with so much stuff. I'm just curious, how did you kind of sift through that stuff?
the another outcome of meditation practice is direct knowingness, or what you might call intuition. So you just know.
Okay.
Like if I had seen an ad for hiring at McDonald's, I wouldn't have even given it a second thought.
Yeah.
But when I saw that poster, I just knew, right? I just had this instantaneous sense of this is it, knowingness.
Sure.
Um, so again, this is the development, meditation and concentration training, and the different tools that I call Unbeatable Mind develop this capacity through the integration of what I call your five capacities or five mountains: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and your spiritual domains. So instead
Okay.
of thinking of those all as separate things, right? You go to church on Sunday, check, that's the spiritual. You go to the gym 3 times a week, check, that's the physical, right? Most people, especially men, don't even do anything with the emotional. It's too scary, right? And they
Right.
don't know how to train their mind, and they've left it up to academics, or their company, or just circumstance, and so their minds
Sure.
aren't in their control, right? They're not trained. And intuition is kind of a murky idea to most people. So what we do is we look at all those as just different aspects of how the body mind works. And through this process, through a process of deliberate daily training, it brings it all together in this experience of integrated wholeness. And that's where these natural capacities that you have as a human begin to open up to you: greater creativity, spontaneous knowingness, insight, intuition, adaptation, flexibility, comfort with rapid change, all these things that are really useful today. And with this AI acceleration that's going on around us.
Sure. Wow, that's cool. Hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to kind of transition that, Mark, from that discussion to how does that work for building elite teams?
Yeah.
Because, like, for instance, when you were in the Navy SEALs, it was just you, but then somehow you started to reverberate out and include others. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Dr. Mark Devine, expert in global leadership and change, and a bunch of other stuff, which we're going to kind of work towards right now because, you transition from this being an internal thing, I'll call it, to now it's like, hey, somebody probably came to you at some point and said, hey, can you do this for my team? I'm struggling with this. Or maybe it just started at the Navy SEAL level. So when did it kind of get outward for you?
Well, very quickly, when I went through SEAL training and became a young, officer, it was really my first real leadership experience. And because I had these other experiences with these internal skills, right, which we talked about: attention control, concentration, meditation, visualization, even arousal control through the breath, then I was showing up a little differently with my team, right? I had better mental and emotional control. I had mental management. I could see the win in my mind before, engaging in the activities. I had, a pretty solid space between stimulus and response, right? And that's important in SEAL training because the instructors are masters at trying to, stimulate you into fight or flight or, confusion and chaos to create the conditions for you to get out of control emotionally so that you either quit or you've solved the problem.
Sure.
And and so just by virtue of me showing up that way had a really positive impact on my team because I was the calm, cool, collected, centered one in the midst of a firestorm. And I was able to communicate to them some basic fundamental skills, right? I call them the big four. I taught them how to breathe properly through their nose, slowing everything down, deep nostril breathing, which triggers their parasympathetic rest digest, which helps them stay calm so they can think better, right? When you're triggered into fight or flight, your IQ literally drops in half. So my small team, like we were keeping our IQ and we were able to stay calm and focused, even in the most intense situations. Secondarily, um, mental management, right? I learned through my training in Zen that it's extraordinarily important to maintain a positive mindset, a positive internal dialogue, and then to translate that into positive external communication. Negative thinking and negative speaking are very destructive, not just to your relationships and your team, but also to your own health and your own energy, your own
Okay.
mindset. So that was the second skill. It's very simple, but I needed to first master it myself. Then I made sure that my team was always, supporting each other and positive. I called it feeding the courage wolf. And then third, and this is a really important skill for all leaders, is using your imagery capabilities, right? Training yourself to have very powerful visualization skills and to always visualize the outcome that you desire. And so what I learned, this is directly applicable to your question, how
Yeah.
can this translate to the team, is to make sure that the team is all visualizing the same outcome, the same win. Because if
Mm.
you can imagine, like if you have a 10-person team and you all have a different mental idea of what victory looks like or what the win looks
Yeah.
like, you could be driving toward 10 different outcomes, even though you're saying the same words, right? You just have the same plan. The
Sure.
plan is only as good as the image of what success looks like. And so we used to talk all the time about what success looked like. And so we had the same image. And this is something I teach my corporate teams now is like, what's your objective? What does it look like? And talk about it and use pictures and imagery and even, if video if you want, which you can create with AI now. So you
Yeah.
all have a common vision. And then the last skill is, it's kind of like you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time story, right? Most
Yep.
people get steeped into a project or a business or launching something new. They're really focused on the totality as opposed to what can they do just right now or today, right, to move the ball forward.
Okay.
So we really got good at chunking down the projects, tasks, the asks into the smallest achievable component, and then we would just execute that, and then we do it again and again and again. So by the time we got 30 to 40% of the way through the entire, ask, whatever was being asked of us, we already had so many wins that our momentum was unstoppable.
So in that situation, Mark, like this chunking down piece, I mean, I'm assuming in Navy SEALs training, you're not thinking about, I mean, you're just trying to get one foot in front of the other, get to the next spot, or are you like 5 to 10 moves ahead of the enemy? That's what I'm struggling to try to figure that
Okay,
balance
that's a
out.
good question. So by chunking it down, it allows you to move fast because the complexity, you try to remove as much complexity from every phase as possible. And because you're removing the complexity, then you're able to move slower and end up operating faster than the enemy or faster than your competition. We used to
Okay.
say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And when you operate with slow is smooth, smooth is fast, the reason you're faster is because you're not making any errors, number one, and number two is you're much closer to the directionality that you need to go. You're not making these wide, correcting the errors and these wide swings. So it's important to understand where you're going, right? You might have a plan, but we know no plan survives contact. You might know in your head what the 5 steps are, the 5 phases of the mission, but you're only going to focus on the one at this particular time because you don't know what's going to happen that's going to affect or change the other 4 phases. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And
Yeah,
but
no, it
you
does.
always got a clear vision of what victory looks like. So regardless of how you get there, right? You find a way or make a way and end up at that victory. This is one of the key reasons why SEALs are so successful. They make a plan, they make it a good enough plan, but then they just basically put it in their back pocket and go, right? Solve one problem after another.
Well, and I think we started out by asking, is it possible to become unbeatable? And I had a different interpretation of what unbeatable was than you did. So that kind of proves your point right there that if we went into an op together or whatever, and we ended up with two different ideas of the same, the same goal, obviously that's where we would be at a disconnect.
Right.
So how do you then take that message to the whole team? And what do you do for the stragglers, I'll call them? Because it's obvious that Navy SEAL quality, everybody's pretty, there's a minimum threshold there. Now in corporate America, there may not be the same threshold where Joe's in the corner and he's just there because he needs a job and he's not really engaged in this whole thing. So, how do you
Sure.
kind of get the stragglers, I'll call them? How do you get them to buy in, or do they just disappear?
It's a great question. The only way you can get a straggler to buy in is through example. He or she has to see that the team is showing up in a very different way, and the results are starting to really accelerate in a positive direction. And
Okay.
if he doesn't get on board, he's going to be left behind. You can't force it. You can't. It's like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. If you're not growth mindset, you can't force it, but you can motivate it or make it aspirational for someone. Be like, oh, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could grow, participate in that.
Yeah.
Um, the training that when I do training, so if you want to have an elite team, that operates in a corporate world with similar qualities of how a SEAL team operates, then everyone's got to be on board, right? Everyone's got to earn their trident. And that's our, the Navy SEAL signature. You got to earn that every single day. So if
Yeah.
you got individuals on your team who are unwilling to do that work, then you either have to get them off the team or see them exit themselves, or you'll never have that elite level, right? You'll have mediocre level. And if you're okay with
Sure.
mediocre level performance because you don't want to upset the apple cart, that's fine. And there's a lot of mediocre teams out there, right, who
Yeah.
don't want to upset the apple cart or be the mean one. But I'm talking about those. I'm talking to people who want to and know that they can or believe they can develop, exceptional teams. And exceptional teams don't tolerate mediocrity.
Yeah. Well, and it's so odd because I mean, Gallup's polls every year show that 1 in 3 people are engaged in their job, which means 2 out of 3 are not engaged. So, when I take the proverbial 10 people on a team, that means like, 6 or 7 of them are not really engaged in what they're doing. So, it's not like we have 1 or 2 stragglers. It's kind of like reversed, at least what the research shows that there's really a minority that are actually leading the fight. I can't imagine you getting any stragglers in combat like that. Did you have
Well,
that? How did your
well,
message help them?
the SEALs have a very long selection program that weeds out, 90, 95% of the people who shouldn't belong.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury in the corporate world. And to be
Right.
fair, to your point, I'm not saying that there's a large percentage or number of these lead operating teams out there. I'm just saying that it's possible. And those who have adopted this mindset, they don't have 33% engagement. They've got 100% engagement.
Yeah.
Um, so the other thing to consider is the business organizational culture of the industrial and information age was just awful, right? It's like it's glorified prison. You go to a corporate office with these cubicles, it's all chunked out, and you're kind of all separate, and and you're oversaturated with task, and you're disconnected from the mission and any sense of service, and the corporate work is completely devoid of growth and nurturing and positivity. And so, of course, you're going to be disengaged. That's why you go to work.
Yeah.
Well, the culture that's going to thrive in the age of VUCA and AI is one where you don't go to work, you go to grow, you go to thrive, right? And your personal mission is aligned with the company's mission or purpose, right? And the company is wise enough to know that they've got to be serving something besides profit, right? And so they're very inspiring and motivating. And companies like that don't even really have to recruit; they just attract the right people who are in
Okay.
alignment. And so these organizations are what one of my peers, Harvard leadership expert um, Robert Keegan, calls a deliberately developmental organization. And it's an organization that is set up so that when you go, you have literally a community of practitioners. Everybody in the team is committed to supporting each other in mutual growth so they can bring out the best in each other and therefore have that growth and growing awareness, growing communication skills, growing compassion, opening, growing perspective translates directly to the bottom line in a positive manner. So
Sure.
and we call that vertical development because you go and the training and development transforms not just what you do and how you do it, but who you are.
Yeah.
And it follows a vertical progression of greater states and stages of awareness and access to consciousness and those types of things.
So when you talk about going to work versus going to thrive, I never even put those two in the same sentence together, like you just did. Is that where the mental management, is that where that comes in, where you're really transforming some of those key thoughts that you have in your brain? Is that where it starts, is just really rethinking some of the things that go on in your life?
Mindset is part of it. So that's focusing on the content, but also doing the practices individually and also as a team that lead to that experience of simultaneous mind that I talked about, where the team suddenly has greater contextual awareness, great arousal control, so the team doesn't get stuck in fight or flight or hyperarousal, and and also, this idea of whole mind that I've addressed a couple times, it's not just left and right hemisphere of your brain working together. It's actually accessing and connecting with and being able to use your heart mind and your gut mind as part of your whole intelligent operating system. And so now we know through research that the heart and the gut have neurons and neurological processing, neurochemicals and whatnot. And so they're literally brains. So we have these three kind of primary brains, and then your
Sure.
entire enteric nervous system, your fascia, your skin, everything. So your body is entirely a brain. And
Okay.
so your subjective experience when you do this vertical development training is that you have access to so much more information, right? Both internally and externally, because you're using all of your senses, internal and external, at a much more rarefied level.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
that translates into like quicker, greater clarity, uh, quicker access to the right answers, right? So adaptability, um, the sensitivity when things are going off track, either with your project or with another individual, because you're going to get that gut feeling that, oh man, something's
Sure.
not right. And greater compassion because you'll have much more of your heart will be online, right? You're literally, your heart mind is open. It's transmitting information effectively up to the central processing unit, which is in your head, the head brain. And so you have a lot more ability to connect deeply with your teammates. And that's where trust comes from, is this authentic connection. And trust is the glue of any real, elite team for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming that in the Navy SEALs, it's really trust is your starting spot as well, because you can't go into much combat without trusting whether somebody's got your six or not. So that's
Right.
that's the spot to start, right? And it seems like that gets lost pretty easy at work when you transition over into corporate America. There's not a lot of trust that's being built. Is that one of the foundations that you guys teach, is that trust needs to be there on a team?
Definitely. Yeah. Trust and courage, trust, and respect are three foundational qualities that we try to develop, individually and across and amongst the team, right? Multi-directionally. And you do that through doing things together that make you feel vulnerable that you normally wouldn't do, right? So you have to take the masks off, in other words.
Sure,
So our training, when we go into the company, we do unique training, right? Where we insist on the participants getting uncomfortable, doing things that make them uncomfortable. And we insist on the leadership participating, right, with everyone else, right? Because
sure.
oftentimes
Yeah,
it's the leaders who's the blocking energy in the team. And through putting, engaging together in things that are uncomfortable and failing together, right, you have this capacity to really to show that you're not trying to be perfect. And we tend to end kind of the judgmentalism and the righteousness and all those things that kind of block energy go away.
sure.
And what comes out of that is a deep respect. But it takes courage to participate, in things that make you uncomfortable because we spend our lifetime avoiding them.
Yeah,
But you have a saying that comfort kills, right? Comfort is like a rut, and you just keep greasing the groove of that rut, and eventually you can't get out of it, right? And then you
yeah.
stop. Growth always comes from riding the edge, right? From pushing the
Yeah.
envelope, from something new and different and hard.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome. We do a ton of work on comfort zone, and we talk about that all the time, that there's not a lot of growth that happens in a comfort zone for that exact reason. So this is fascinating, Mark. A couple questions, and I'm going to let you go. As we start to land the plane today, what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered that you want to reiterate, or maybe it's something that we haven't covered yet. But what would your tip of the day be today?
I would say so. I introduced a practice to the SEALs back in 2006 called box breathing. It's powerful because what it does is it retrains you how to breathe, right? And it retrains you how to breathe effectively. And so that your whole entire nervous system then reorients around this effective nostril breathing, where you're breathing 5 count in, 5 count out, 6 breaths per minute. And I've been doing this, like I said, since 2006. And it wasn't until 2023 or so that research kind of validated that the optimal breathing pattern for health, longevity, and clarity is nostril breathing, 6 breaths per minute.
Wow.
So the way we train it is something called box breathing. And box breathing has extra benefits. Arousal control is the primary benefit, getting your body back into balance, reactivating the parasympathetic nervous system, which has gone dormant in most people, and leading to this calm, like clear, kind of like balanced mind. And it's simply inhaling to a 5 count, each count being roughly a second, holding your breath for a 5 count,
Yep.
exhaling for a five, and holding the breath after the exhale for a 5 count. And if it's too much to do the five, start with four. And to turn this into a daily practice, starting with 20 minutes in the morning. The ideal prescription would be 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the late afternoon or early evening. Um, I challenge my tribe to do this for 30 days and report back to me. And just
Yeah.
even 30 days of this practice is transformative.
Wow, that's so cool. So box breathing is awesome. In for five, hold it for five, out for five, and then hold it for five.
Even
That's
knows.
a great way to do that. And it seems so simple, but it is hard to do, especially if you're trying to do it for 20 minutes and be intentional about it. I mean, I do it before I speak. I do that to just kind of center myself, and but I never thought about it for 20 minutes. So I'm gonna have to try that. That's awesome. We could again talk about this all day. If somebody's listening right now, Mark, and they want to learn more about anything that we talked about, they want to learn more about something that you might be able to help them with, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
My personal website is a good place to kind of, it's like a catch-all, right? So it points to my personal coaching and my podcast and my books. The training that I'm alluding to, I call Unbeatable Mind, and so we have a coach certification program and we have courses and a community at unbeatablemind.com, which is a good place to check out as well.
Awesome. So markdevine.com or unbeatablemind.com. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping we answered that question today. Is it possible to become unbeatable? We started by explaining what unbeatable was, and we had two different views on that, which was fantastic. I appreciate that insight. And for you listening, rather than jump into your next podcast or your next thing, sit with what Mark said today, because whether it was purpose and passion or principle, asking better questions, the breathing, the mental management, the imagery, or chunking down, those are all things that you can do to really work and improve yourself. And if you get stuck along the way, reach out to Mark. He'd love to chat with you and help you to be able to do that. So, again, thank you for your service in all the years that you protected our families. Words can't even say how you set yourself aside to do that. So, thank you for doing that. Thank you for all that you're doing now. This is fascinating. So, appreciate it. And I will continue to learn from you. And thank you again for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it very much.